First, let me introduce my guest, officially, although I have to say that introducing someone as legendary as Guy Kawasaki officially is a little hard because of course, I referred to your bio in the book and I will read it out for you guys, but it's probably the tip of the iceberg because you have had a remarkably long, list of accomplishments.
I'm
But
old.
well, experienced. So, according to a very short intro in the book, in case somebody here doesn't know, Guy Kawasaki is the chief evangelist of Canva and the creator of Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People podcast. He was the chief evangelist of Apple, trustee of the Wikimedia Foundation, and brand ambassador of Mercedes-Benz, and has authored several books, several bestsellers. I believe the number of your books is at 13, right?
I'm adding flowers to my background here.
Thank you. I need to add something to my background, but it's too flat. So you have written many books, and your latest book came out just recently, which is why we're having actually a conversation, because Mindvalley Book Club is focusing on all the new releases in personal growth and transformation books. We're screening the books, and then we're picking what we love and what we think is awesome. And having been in this industry for over 20 years, it's quite a job to screen and pick what you think is remarkable. And maybe I've been reading your book this past few days that I use the word remarkable so often. But let's start, and I will geek out here a little bit. Let's start with the definitions, because I know all the academic work start with definitions. So what is remarkable? And I will give a little bit of a context. We often talk about success, about professional accomplishments. So remarkable is not really a very common word when we talk about, what kind of life you want to build. So what does it mean, and how is it different from those other, states that we are trying to accomplish?
Sure. I think that most people measure success in terms of financial success, how much money they have made or what they're worth. But in my book, remarkable is measured by how much of a difference you've made to the world and how much you've made the world a better place. So you can be extremely poor and still remarkable, and you can also be extremely rich and not remarkable. There are very few billionaires on my podcast and in my book, because quite frankly, I don't consider most billionaires to be remarkable, especially the ones in finance, like private equity and hedge fund managers. Like, yeah, they made a lot of money, but what have they done to make the world a better place? So it's hard to get on my podcast and in my book. We reject literally about 10 people a day who want to be on my podcast.
Well, I'm not surprised. There is this one quote that I wanted to, since you answered this question like this, which I found very fun. You say, the overachiever's dream of graduating from an Ivy League university and jumping on the fast track at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs to fame and fortune on the way to infinity and beyond is unrealistic and unremarkable, even if you pull it off. So in a way, what we call a success, you do not consider it remarkable. Yet pretty much when we think about remarkable people, they are at least successful in the sense that they're known, even if they're not famous, but at least a lot of people know them, so they have fame. And, in contemporary world, fame is pretty much money. So how is this something which just strikes you, that you do something which makes you suddenly remarkable, or is it an aspiration that you have to actively pursue?
Well, I think the aspiration that remarkable people have is not to be remarkable. Their aspiration is to make a difference. So, for example, I don't think Jane Goodall spends any time thinking about how she can position herself as being remarkable. I think she spends all her time worrying about the future of the earth. And so, but that is what makes her remarkable. And that is a very important point, that this is not a traditional self-help book in the sense of I'm teaching you how to rebrand, reposition, how to put lipstick on a pig. I'm trying to tell you that fundamentally the way you be remarkable is you make a difference. And then if you make a difference, then people will have no choice but to consider you remarkable.
Mhm. It is a little bit overwhelming, of course, to think of making a big difference, because a lot of the people,
Well, you
yeah.
don't need to make a big difference. You don't need to be Jane Goodall or Steve Jobs to be remarkable. You can change just one life. You can change a classroom. You can change a team. You can change your own life. It it's nothing to do with how many computers you've sold or how many books you've sold. It's have you made a difference and made the world a better place. Not everybody can be a Steve Jobs or a Jane Goodall. In fact, in the history of human achievement, there's only been one Steve Jobs and one Jane Goodall.
Mhm. So I know you've interviewed in the framework of your podcast, of course, but also through your life, you've met a lot of really outstanding people. But can you bring an example of one truly deeply remarkable human being who is not known to the rest of the world, and maybe is remarkable with something something not earth-shattering, just as an example?
Yeah, so there is a woman featured in my book named Martha Nino, and she was smuggled across the US-Mexican border as a baby. And she settled in the Bay Area. She lived in a one-bedroom house with about 15 other people. She eventually finished college and she began working for Adobe, and now she's an executive at the Adobe. And I think that that is a remarkable story, that you snuck across the US border, you were an illegal alien, you were in a house with 15 other illegal aliens, and now you're an executive at Adobe. So, she's not a billionaire. She hasn't sold millions of computers. She hasn't, done the kind of things that most people consider successful and remarkable. But I think that's a great story. So what's wrong with that story?
So what exactly makes her remarkable, her story remarkable?
Well, the fact that she did what she did despite all that, and from to go in one generation from illegal alien baby to marketing executive at Adobe, I think that's pretty remarkable. You know, Donald Trump didn't exactly do that in one generation, for example.
Well, your own story is also actually pretty remarkable as far as I, I understand. But one more question that I have, well, I have a lot of questions. As I was reading the book initially, especially the first part, actually, for those who haven't read the book, the journey consists of the three parts. It is 9 parts, but three broader parts. One is growth, one is grit, and one is grace. And actually, probably we'll skim over growth, because in personal growth industry, I mean, Mindvalley's personal growth industry, we talk about growth. I'm actually more curious about grit and grace. But let's start with the growth. When I was reading this first part, I was feeling that you talk to younger generation, and it was kind of nice, because we often make fun of the youngest generation, say that they are, their executive functions are down and they're entitled and whatnot. And also, I think it was when you mentioned, try to explain what a photo camera with a film was. I was like, okay, you're obviously talking to younger generation. But when we moved on to grit, and well, grit in particular, I felt that your examples became kind of much more profound, maybe not profound. Profound is the wrong word. Heavier to digest, and a little bit more. Me as an entrepreneur, like, make me question myself. So, who is your book actually for exactly? Because you do speak in a very young speak, but
Well,
who did you write it for, and why?
my book is for anybody with $20. That's the answer. um, I have specifically targeted this book towards Generation Z and millennials, because I think that at that stage of life, you're really searching for direction, and people are giving you conflicting advice. And in a perfect world, parents and grandparents would buy this book for their children and grandchildren. Although, if you're a parent or a grandparent and you're sort of unsure about how to live your life, I think this book can help. But really, it's for the young people. The chapters are very short. The sections are very short. There's a lot of bullet items. There's a lot of headings and subheadings. I have to read about 50 books a year for my podcast, and many of these books they go for 4 or 5 pages without a heading. So you, after 1 or 2 pages, you're like lost. Like, what am I reading about? Because the sections are so big. And so this book is written for people who want to read 2 or 3 pages and get one idea, 2 or 3 pages and get the next idea. And yeah, it's designed for them. I want them to have a manual for life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say it might be lightly written, but it is actually so fast-paced that it is not a relaxing book, to be honest.
no, no,
But
this is, my books, they're written as the kind of book that I would want to read.
mm,
And the kind of book that I want to read is action oriented. It's tactical oriented. It's practical. It's not about, these 50,000 foot visionary, big mega trends that you read about. You say, yeah, thank you very much. I mean, now you told me that AI is going to be a big deal. I mean, you know, if you didn't figure that out by now, you're kind of hopeless. So yeah, let's take it as a given that AI is going to be a big deal. So now what exactly do I do?
mhm.
So my book is written at that level of, okay, this is exactly what you need to do next.
Yeah, it's very actionable. In fact, I think if people were to take every proposed action, it would take them a very long time to read the book.
It would, yes, yes.
Unfortunately, I have to do that every week in new books. So um, maybe I'll do some actions along the way later. But I want to come back to this idea that I did feel that you were talking to a younger generation. Although, if you haven't read the book, I have to confess that it is deceiving. It actually is for not just for younger generation. I like your quote that it's not. I'm misquoting it, but it's not where you start, but where you're going. Actually, where you want to end up. So it is definitely for all ages. But why did you specifically focus on younger generation? I feel, and I don't know younger generation very well, but they're very different from us, from my parents' generation. Their motivation is very different, and I wonder if there is even anyone out there who understands them, what they want in life. So why did you want to talk to younger generation?
Well, I believe that, first of all, the younger generation is the most pliable and the most malleable right now. Once you get to 70, I mean, things are pretty much set in place. I know because I'm 70. But I really think that, if you write for young people, then old people will embrace it. But if you write for old people, young people will not embrace it. So just rationally, from a marketing perspective, the thing to do is, make it for young people. I think it's the same thing with fashion, right? So with fashion, you design something for young people and you hope old people will also embrace it. If you design something for old people, there's no way that young people will embrace it. So the rational thing to do is make it for young people. And yeah, I mean, and as I said, I hope that many old people buy it for young people. I mean, I cannot think of a better book. Of course, I'm prejudiced. I cannot think of a better book for people to buy as a graduation present now that we're in June.
I absolutely agree, by the way. So if you have been thinking about graduation present, very, very good book. In fact, my son is going into the last year in school, and as I was reading, I was thinking, you should give him the book to read. So true story. But I have to compliment you on your humor. I've read a lot of books, and I know that humor is now part of a deal. You have to put humor in. But what I really appreciate about your humor, and I'm sorry if it sounds odd, but it's a little un-American, as in you actually have this quirky sense of humor and you laugh about yourself quite a bit. So I really appreciate that. It was very, very pleasant. So, but coming back,
Can I tell you something?
yeah.
I think a sense of humor that is the ability to make people laugh and also the ability to understand jokes and to laugh. That's a sign of intelligence.
Mm.
Basically, dumb people are not funny and dumb people don't get the joke. Um, so this is a very good test of intelligence.
Oh, thank you. So I want to get back to young people because there's also one interesting idea, and we are still in the growth section, by the way, about not looking for your passion and that being a mistake.
Yes.
It just happened so that my last interview was with a pediatric psychologist, and she was saying also how dangerous and how detrimental it is for young people who are still finishing school to be focused on this one mission in life.
Yeah.
Could you maybe, and I know it's not so much a question as a request, elaborate on that, on that not dilemma, but in that dichotomy of purpose versus just browsing your interests?
Yeah, so I think that many people set up young people for failure when they tell them that you need to find your passion. And it's as if they believe that when you find your passion, you instantly fall in love, you instantly dedicate your life to it. And that is simply not true. And especially if you're a young person right now, you probably have 70, 80, 90 years of productive life. And so, you don't need to find your passion at 19 and fall in love and figure out what you're going to do for the next 70 years of your life. And in a sense, it's a lot like dating and marriage. And, how many of you would say to an 18-year-old person, why haven't you already met the person that you're in love with and you're going to spend the rest of your life with? Like, what's wrong with you? You're 18. You should have discovered this by now. I don't think anybody, well, maybe that's not true, but I don't think most people would say that to young people. And that should be the same thing in terms of what your interests are. So I think you should scratch a lot of itches that you should, whatever interests you. It could be hockey, it could be surfing, it could be English, it could be violin, it could be photography, it could be podcasting, just collect a lot of data, try a lot of things, and then over the course of time, you may discover 3, 4, 5 passions in your life, and that is just fine. In America, in particular, a lot of people want their kids to find their passion in life because they want them to have a good college entrance exam essay, which is the most dumbass reason to find a passion in your life. So I want people to just collect a lot of data before they, dedicate themselves.
So, but would you say, because you say you're 70, which I also calculated, by the way, would you say that you know your passion now, or are you still scratching new itches, which
Well, if I look back, I fell in love with Macintosh, right? So that was one passion. I fell in love with tech entrepreneurship. I started several companies. I fell in love with social media. I was really into social media. So I have had personal computing. I've had venture capital. I've had social media. Internet is obviously another one. And now I love podcasting and I love AI. So I've had a lot of interest in I, I I took up hockey at the age of 44. I took up surfing at the age of 60. So I've had a lot of passions and not just, sort of professional development.
Mhm.
So I've done a lot of things and I would not change anything like that.
So surfing, I understand, is a fairly extreme kind of sport. Isn't it
Yes,
dangerous
it is.
to pick it up at pre-retirement age?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't do the kind of surfing that you die at, right? I mean, there is that kind of surfing, but still surfing is a challenging sport at any age because there's so many variables. And like track and field or running or soccer or something, you're running around, you're doing that, but surfing, you're on a piece of foam and you're in the ocean and you're subject to the wind and the tide and other surfers. And, there's so many variables going on, many more variables than in most other sports. So
Mhm.
that's what makes surfing so interesting, is because it's so challenging. And yeah, so I think that, you got to have challenges in life. I mean, that keeps you young.
Yeah, that was my next question, of course, because it might seem like I'm asking about personal questions, but I know you brought up surfing in the chapter where you're talking about growth mindset, and also I know that you've met a lot of really cool people through surfing. But why exactly did you pick that? Was that to actually keep yourself active, to do something what young
No, no, no,
people
no,
do?
no.
Right.
I took up surfing because my daughter took up surfing.
Oh.
And so I took up hockey because my sons took up hockey. So I just wanted to, I wanted to take up what they took up as opposed to making them take up what I loved. Uh, so that, that was just fine. I think it's a good way to parent, that rather than forcing your kids to take up what you like, you take up what they like.
Mm. Well, I might be parenting my mom wrong, but I'm taking my mom to boxing class for the first time tomorrow with me.
Is boxing big in Estonia?
No, it's an accident. I started doing it on somebody's advice, and actually, it stuck to me of all the sports, surprisingly.
That in itself is a great story.
So, and I promise not to stick on growth for a long time. But if we don't get it to grit and grace, you know what to do. You buy the book and you read. But I wanted to ask one more thing from the growth category. There's this beautiful quote, and I could try and look for it because I screenshot it. But it's something along the lines that you can fail wrong, actually, and by failing carelessly, you create a lot of damage. So I wanted to slow down here a little bit because in contemporary discourse, we talk a lot about failure, start fast, fail fast, move on. So where did this nugget of wisdom come from? As in, like, have you burnt your fingers by failing carelessly? Or why did you bring it up? Because it's not a very popular topic.
Well, I think I brought it up because I see people, expressing the thought that failure is okay, failure is no big deal, fail fast, pivot, and all that. And I think that's a very cavalier attitude, that failing is something you should avoid at all costs. But if you do that and you still fail, then at least learn from your failure. But to go into something thinking, yeah, it's no big deal if I fail, I think that probably increases the probability that you will fail. So you need to fight failure with everything you can. And still, if you do fail, then at least learn from the failure. But don't go around thinking that failure is no big deal. It is a big deal.
Hmm. That's actually a fresh thought in a way because we talk so much about how it is good to fail. So um, how can you avoid that kind of failure, which is dangerous for you, for your environment, for, as you mentioned in the book, some people's livelihoods depend on that, or maybe a good example would be Elizabeth Holmes that you write about, and that, well, probably failure is a very weak word for that, but
That's criminal failure, yes.
yeah, that's a little more than failure. But how do you avoid this kind of failure without becoming paralyzed with fear of failure?
Well, I mean, the way you avoid failure is grit, right? You don't give up. You keep trying, and you be careful. I'm not saying you shouldn't be innovative. I'm not saying you shouldn't be bold. I'm not saying any of that. But you know what? Just to be able to just to say like, well, we raised $5 million. It's not really our money. These venture capitalists gave us this money to gamble, so we should just roll the dice and see what happens. But that's a bad attitude. I mean, $5 million is a lot of money. Somebody is paying for that. It came from some pension fund or something. Somebody is going to get hurt when you lose that $5 million.
Mhm.
So you need to be careful with, yeah, and a good steward of resources, even if it's not your resource. I think it's just a moral question.
Mhm. So you just mentioned grit, which is very lucky for me because I can latch onto this word and move to grit, the second part of that. What's the difference between grit and plain hard work, sweat, and tears that we often put
Well,
into?
Well, the difference between grit and plain hard work is that I love alliteration, and plain hard work is not an alliteration with growth and grace. So I wanted 3 words, all starting with GR: growth, grit, grace. So plain hard work doesn't fit into that.
But if we forget the words, is grit about hard work, or is it something different?
It is about hard work. I mean, we don't need to overcomplicate this. This is like grit means you just work hard, and you work long and hard.
Mm-hmm. So where do you find the fuel to keep going? Especially, let's say, you do write a lot. I mean, you bring up a lot of remarkable stories of people that you have interviewed and that you have met through your life, and connecting the dots backwards is kind of easy. You see their genius decisions, and you see now you see that they were right. But the question which I sometimes ask myself as an entrepreneur, that sometimes things take much longer than you like, and you start something and you're starry-eyed, and then you fail, and then you keep going, and then at some point you discover yourself in this deep dark tunnel, as I like to.
Well,
Where do you
well,
find the fuel for that?
I hate to tell you, but what you just described is called life. That is how life works. So, what can I say? I mean, you mentioned earlier this concept that yes, you're going to go to the right school, you're going to get into an Ivy League school, then you're going to go to work for Goldman Sachs, or you're going to go work for McKinsey and Company, and then you're going to become this billionaire, and that's the straight and narrow path to success.
Mhm.
Well, there are people who have done that, but uh, it's not exactly the norm. you
Yeah.
know, Steve Jobs didn't finish college. I mean, and Steve Jobs died at a very young age. I mean, it's like life doesn't happen according to your ideal plan. You have to have the grit to pursue things, even when things are going to shit, basically.
So where does one look for that fuel to keep going when the things go to shit?
I mean,
I like the
this
quote.
comes from, I think it comes from both, the realization that things are not going to always go your way. They're not always going to go easy. So that's number one. Number two, I think that you can draw inspiration from other people that, I have a profile in this book about someone who served 22 years in prison before he was freed. I mean, 22 years in prison, that's that's a pretty big handicap to overcome, right? So, I mean, I have another person in the book who has ALS, and ALS usually kills you within 2 years. She's now had ALS for 10 years. And I have people in the book who lived in the projects of New York. Both parents were crack addicts. So when you hear those kinds of stories of ALS, crack addict parents, and in prison for 22 years, and you're thinking, oh my God, my life is so hard. I have to work so hard. I'm at McKinsey and I'm hating it, and I have to work 60 hours a week. Well, you could be in prison for 22 years. So, who's working hard? Who has the harder life? It's all relative.
Mhm. So you do mention a few times in the book how you draw inspiration for other people's stories, like exactly the grid, for example. But I have a slightly unfair question. Do you learn from your own mistakes or from the mistakes of all the wonderful people that you meet in your life?
Uh, Yes, actually. I mean, I've made mistakes in my life. I mean, I didn't go to prison, but I definitely have made mistakes in my life. No, nobody lives a mistake-free life, and the the thing is that the you have to derive value from mistakes. So if you make mistakes and you learn, you could argue that's not a mistake. But if you make a mistake and you make the same mistake, then you're just stupid and you're not learning. And that's not remarkable.
So do you have a process for your mistake making?
Do I have a process for making
Yeah, no,
mistakes?
no, no, for after. So you make a mistake. Do you embark on some kind of, I don't know, reflective process, or how do you deal with them?
I think about it. I mean, I don't have a magic process. I mean, I just hope I learn fast. I'm a quick study.
Do they actually impact your self-perception?
Ah, you mean, does it crush my spirit and does it make me give up? The answer to that is no.
In a more dramatic way, yes, but maybe crush spirit and still not give up. But
Well, I mean, if you're crushed, it's hard to learn by
yeah.
being crushed. But I'm telling you, people, listen, what could be more crushing an experience than going to jail for 22 years?
Mm,
I mean, or what could be more crushing than have a fatal disease that is not curable? I mean, that's crushing. I have not had that kind of crushing. I mean, listen, I lost my hearing. Many people would consider that crushing, but oh, I when I lost my hearing, I kept thinking about, well, God, let's say God give you a choice. Guy, you can either have hearing and have ALS, or you cannot have hearing and not have ALS. What's the choice?
mm,
I choose deafness.
mm.
So it's all relative.
Yeah, it's actually it was a little surprising sometimes to read something like you said. This made me think about the finality of life and this philosophical aspects of this journey. But I'll actually push through, and I think the most interested I was in the chapter about grace, and I want to understand. Again, I will geek out a little bit. What is the definition in the um, context of your book? Because you talk about doing something, making the world a better place. What does grace mean in that context?
Well, grace in that context means that you have figured out that you need to repay society, that you need to repay the world for the benefits that you have reaped, and that you actually have a moral obligation. You have an obligation to help others. And so that means you take the high road and you help people without expectation of repayment or anything like that. You help people just for the sheer joy and beauty of helping people. That's grace and graciousness.
Mm. And is that possible in all sorts of careers? Because when we think about making the world a better place or helping other people, you naturally think about something like charity or philanthropy. But for an everyday person who maybe has a paid job and is working for a boss, or the young people who are just finishing school and want to make their first million nevertheless, what is the grace in that context?
Well, I mean, grace in that context could be that you just help your friends and family. It could be that, you leave a decent tip at the restaurant. I mean, these are all tiny little things that add up. And it being gracious and graceful doesn't necessarily mean you create a $500 million fund that, donates money to charity. There are plenty of gracious people who have no money and they serve the community. They do voluntary work. They do things. They mentor people. Uh, I put in the book a list of things of ways you can help people. I think there's like 8 or 10 in that list, and some of it involves money. Some of it involves funding other things, but a lot of it is you can use a company's product just to help them. You can tell people about the product. You can mentor people. You can advise people. I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, you know what? If you say there's no way for you to help people, um, you're probably not very gracious. There are ways.
Another interesting aspect of graciousness, which I noticed in the very beginning of the chapter, was you mentioned, Jane Goodall comes the first to mind, but this confidence and peace and calmness as them being gracious. Where does that come from? This well,
Well, I think
calmness and confidence. Yes.
I think one of the largest
Yeah.
causes of that is maturation. That is, as you get older, you realize this more and more. Man, and maybe when you're young, you're so busy trying to make a living and you're so busy trying to, achieve success, and you're so busy trying to do all these like fundamental things that it may not occur to you that there's an element of grace and graciousness to life. And so, listen, I'm 70 years old, right? And yeah, maybe it takes 60 years to figure this out, but it will come. It and I'll give you an example of something that that people will be familiar with. So I would say that until about 3 or 4 years ago, if somebody said, "Well, who's the closest person to Steve Jobs alive in terms of being remarkable?" And I would have said Elon Musk, because Elon Musk has, single-handedly created the electric car revolution,
Yeah.
reusable rocket ships, satellite internet access. He's boring tunnels under cities. He's implanting chips in people's heads. He's going to Mars. He's doing all these remarkable things. But now, if you were to ask me today, is Elon Musk remarkable? I would probably say, yes, he's made a difference. He's made the world a better place. But on the third score of grace, he's an
Yeah.
absolute failure. Absolute failure. You could not find an example of someone who's less gracious than Elon Musk. And I think that is a good example for people to think about. I mean, one very tactical question is, would you want your kid to grow up to be an Elon Musk? Or maybe, would you want your kid to marry an Elon Musk?
Right. Marry
So
for
would you want your son to be an Elon Musk?
no, but if he became, I would have to love him nevertheless. But that's probably something different, a different story.
Well, that's because you're gracious, not because he's gracious.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. I get it. So, it's a little maybe selfish question of me, but you have met so many wonderful people. But I believe that there are people sometimes that you do not agree with, or maybe even dislike what they're doing. What is your way to deal with these people, and how do you stay gracious with people?
Well, okay, so this is where it's easier to write the book than actually do what the book says. Okay. So I tell you, yeah, I have met many ungracious people. And so I have several strategies. One strategy is just ignore them. Like, don't let them get in your head. And I meet with people all the time who are, thought leaders, and they're remarkable people. They're trying to change the education for math. They're trying to change political things, and they get attacked on social media. And I keep telling them, this is a very deep philosophical question. If somebody attacks you on social media and you don't read the attack, did the attack really occur?
Hmm.
It's like asking, if a tree falls in a forest and you didn't see the tree fall, did the tree fall? In my mind, if somebody attacks you on social media and you don't see it, it didn't happen. Who gives a shit?
Hmm.
So one strategy is simply ignore it, because it's gonna go away. And the internet is a very, very busy, hectic place. And you may think that, oh my God, this person attacked me, and now the whole world knows that this person attacked me. Well, I hate to tell you, but it's probably the only person who knows that this person attacked you is the person. And no, it's scrolled by in like a
Mhm.
split second on Threads or on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever, right? And it's
Mhm.
gone. Nobody knows. So, don't make yourself crazy. And arguably, by bringing it up and trying to defend yourself and, blah blah blah, you're going to extend the life of that attack. You should shorten the life of that attack. So strategy number one is ignore it. Strategy number two, which is probably a more valuable piece of advice, is that rather than asking people what you believe or why you believe that, you ask them how they came to believe that.
Mhm.
Because by asking them how they came to believe that, I think you'll have greater empathy for what their thinking is. So, if you are, let's take some extreme example. Let's say you find somebody who is like anti-government, I'm talking about US, anti-government, anti-democracy, anti-rights, all this kind of like the kind of the worst case, conservative kind of stereotype. Well, then you find out that this person is a Vietnam War veteran and cannot get benefits and cannot get treatment from the Veterans Administration, and came back with post-traumatic stress disorder, and society has basically left him or her out to dry. If you find out how this person came to have this anger and these attitudes, you might understand them better and not just condemn them for being stupid.
I'm sorry for this maybe sidestep, but I did a book tour in August in the southern states of US, and I discovered Alabama for the first time. And I had exactly what you were talking about, the experience where I met people with whom maybe I politically disagree, but I had such a strong feeling that even Americans very often don't understand the whole spectrum of different viewpoints and different conditions and circumstances in which people live. So I really think that it's a wonderful and interesting country, but it's also so diverse, and everyone is just a human. There was this one lady who was saying crazy stuff when it came to political things, but she was super nice. She actually drove us around and tried to find a place for us to eat in the middle of the night in Mobile, where everything was closed. So humans are like deep inside, we are humans, except maybe Putin. Sorry for being political.
I mean, yeah, you might have to draw the line at Putin and Trump. Yes, I can understand that. Yes, I can understand that. I just interviewed a woman from Ukraine who is a human rights lawyer, Nobel Prize laureate, right? And yeah, I mean, there are limits. I mean, I guess you could try to understand why Hitler became Hitler, but I'd suggest you not spend too much time on thoughts like that, and you deal with the regular people you can.
Yeah.
I think that if people were physically in contact with people, there would be much less controversy and anger and violence. It's because that they're in their own little world, and they do not understand, they do not relate, they have no exposure to other people. And if you met these people under any other circumstance, you would probably get along just fine.
So toxic people aside, do you think there is any benefit in trying to actually understand people in your life, even if you disagree with them? Why I'm asking that is, in personal growth community, we often have this experience where people discover personal growth and the teachers, and then they say, oh, my family doesn't understand me. And then this maybe other extreme where we start cutting off people because we call them so-called toxic. Is there any benefit in trying to actually keep the relationship, mend the relationship, try to understand another side?
Listen, I'm not a psychiatrist, okay? So I don't know the answer to this, because in a sense, like 5 minutes ago, I told you, learn to ignore people, right? But now we're saying, well, instead of ignoring people, you should try to understand how they came to believe this. So those two things are kind of direct opposites. Well, life is complex. What can I say? I mean, I don't know if you should invest too much time trying to figure out why the internet troll is attacking you.
Yeah.
But if it's your neighbor you're not getting along with, that's probably worth the investment, but not some, lonely boy 15 on X is attacking you. I've what can I do about lonely boy 15 on X who's attacking me? My advice is ignore lonely boy 15 on X.
So thank you for this actually personal step aside from the topics of the book. I will ask one last question about the book or about the topics that were covered in the book. And by the way, if you guys who are live do want to ask something, you still have a chance. There's a Q&A. If it was in the chat, I would have probably missed it. The question that I wanted to ask, you talk about education as something imperative for growth, and you personally have spectacular education, of course, but also mentioned that, not everybody has access to that. Could you elaborate on that? Because we as a society now are trying to redefine education, especially the higher education beyond the
Yes.
school.
So I think people should separate the concept of education, which is learning, from formal education, which is a degree or, from an institution. So, yeah, listen, if you are fortunate enough to be able to go to college, by all means, I think you should go. It's 4 more years of learning about the world, being exposed to new people. Now, there are people who cannot go to college for financial or, whatever reasons. And so I'm telling you that, going to college is not necessary nor sufficient to be remarkable, but learning and growth is. So you can continue to learn and grow without formal education. So the fact that you cannot have formal education should not make you give up on growth. You just need to find different ways to grow. And that could be Khan Academy. That could be using ChatGPT. That could be using Wikipedia. I mean, there are many ways to learn without a formal education. So at the end of the day, the goal is to be educated, not to have degrees. There are plenty of people with degrees who are idiots. Trust me. I mean, you can see a lot of them in the in the political game of the United States, but let's not go down that rat hole. But anyway, let's
Well,
just say that there are many people with Ivy League educations that I look at that, I said, what happened to you? I mean, how can you believe that the earth is flat and and the world and the universe revolves around the earth? I mean, what happened to you in Ivy Leagues?
So I wanted to finish up, and I'll finish, I promise. But I do want to ask one more question. You do express. I know that U.S. is quite polarized in a lot of things, including politics, of course, but also the flat world and whatnot. Where do you get the confidence and bravery to just state very clearly what you think without trying to be diplomatic or masking it? Even in the book, there are a few hints where you can pretty much understand your views quite transparently.
Well, there's several things. One is I'm old and I'm not trying to like thread the needle so that I can be hired by anybody, right? So it's not like I'm worried about, people are going to take my political views and not hire me, because I'm not looking for a job. I would also make the case that if people are going to take my political views and not hire me, I probably don't want to work for you. So that's number one. Number two is I've been very lucky, and I have the financial resources where I don't give a shit. I can just say what I want at this point in my life. So that's second. The third thing is I truly do believe that I have a moral obligation to tell it like it is. And, in 2016, I was in Germany and I was with some friends, and they said, Guy, to this day, we ask our parents and our grandparents, like, how did you let Hitler come to power? How could a person like Hitler come to power and take over Germany? And they said to me, Guy, right now, the United States, it is 1930. And you have to make a choice, Guy. Do you want your grandchildren to wonder, did Grandpa Guy fight against fascism in America? Did Grandpa Guy take a stand? Or was he worried about how many people were following him on Twitter? Or was he worried about, not getting a job because he condemned racism? Or, well, did Grandpa Guy, did he stand up for LGBTQ rights? Did he stand up for teaching Black history? Did he stand up for the rights of, minorities and brown and Black and yellow people? So, Guy, it's the time you have to make this choice. And when I heard that, that was it. That I went full on, and I just let it rip from that point.
Thank you so much for this answer. I really love particularly the third point, because I think the first two are just privileges which you're lucky to have, but the third point actually makes it
Yes.
imperative for everyone, because I agree. I actually do think about that. And of course, I'm not as involved in American politics, but we have a big neighbor to our right or left, I do not know, but and I sometimes think that, sometimes 6 years from now, somebody is going to ask, how did you guys allow Putin come to power? So it's relevant. I think it's relevant for us as well. It's just that maybe we should have more time and talk about politics next time. So, my dear friends who are live with us, thank you for coming and for actually battling with our links, which were not working. Please leave a heart for my wonderful guest in the chat. And if you're watching this later in recording, which will be majority of you guys, do leave a heart in the comments below. I think, whether we see hearts or not, it's the love and the energy that matters. So
Thank you so much for having me. How many people are live right now?
We have 55 currently.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's nice. We've had a bit of so those who are live, I can tell you, we just discovered that we have a bit of a bug with our platform, and the link is acting up, so it only works like part of the times. But thank you for coming, and majority will be watching it in recording. So thank you for watching it in recording. I appreciate that too.
And
But
this is a dumb question, but can you get my book in Estonia?
I will have to ask our bookshops, and then they will probably order it in. We do sell some books in English, but not a lot. So when me and my kids end up in US, we were just visiting their dad in Florida. The first 3 days they spent going from one bookshop to another bookshop to another bookshop, because they said that they carry different books, and they wanted. I had to buy a suitcase to bring books back. So.
Well, you know what? I mean, I would say that it's better to buy a suitcase to bring books back than to buy a suitcase to bring back, Hermes and Louis Vuitton bags and Gucci shoes. So
I'm bad at shopping, but I don't know. I mean, bad because I can't force myself to do that. That's why I'm wearing jeans.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank
All the
you.
best to all of you.
Yeah, Guy, thank you so much. I just wanted to also officially thank you for finding time and to meeting with
Sure.
our community. It was a huge pleasure, and thank you for writing this book.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.